The vision started when Abigail Wheeler was 12. Brief glimpses of things that hadn't happened yet: a broken wagon wheel, a neighbor's house catching fire, a summer storm when the sky was clear. By her 22nd birthday in 1875, the townspeople of Winslow, Arizona Territory, had taken to calling her Mad Abby behind her back. Some said it to her face. Only her father had believed her, and now he was gone, leaving her alone with her gift that everyone else called a curse. The dust from the approaching rider caught Abigail's attention as she hung laundry behind the small house she'd inherited. She paused, squinting against the harsh Arizona sun. The vision came without warning: the rider falling, blood on his temple, a mountain lion slinking away. She gasped, dropping the damp sheet back into the basket. "No," she whispered, already moving toward the stable where her father's old mare waited. Someone needed help, whether they would believe her warnings or not. Abigail rode hard toward the North Trail, her heart pounding in time with the mare's hooves. The visions had never been this urgent before, this clear. Usually, they were fragments, confusing glimpses that made sense only after they came to pass. But this one, she knew exactly where to go, when to be there. She reached the rocky outcropping just as the rider came into view. He was tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered in a worn leather vest, his hat pulled low against the sun. A cowboy, likely working for one of the big ranches outside town. "Stop," she called out, waving frantically. "Please stop right there." The rider pulled up short, his hand instinctively moving toward the gun at his hip. "Madam," his voice was deep, wary. "Don't go any further," Abigail said, breathless from her ride. "There's a mountain lion. It's going to spook your horse." His eyes narrowed beneath the brim of his hat. "How could you possibly know that?" As if in answer, a low growl came from the rocks above them. The cowboy's horse reared, but he was ready for it, controlling the animal with practiced skill. The mountain lion appeared on the ledge, muscles tensed and ready to pounce. The cowboy drew his gun with lightning speed, firing a warning shot that sent the big cat retreating into the rocks. When the echo of the gunshot faded, he turned to stare at her. "How did you know?" Abigail swallowed hard, already regretting her impulsive rescue. "I just had a feeling." "No, madam, that wasn't a feeling." He urged his horse closer. "You knew exactly what was going to happen. I've heard talk in town. You're Wheeler's girl, aren't you?" "The one they call Mad," she finished for him, lifting her chin. "Yes, that's what they call me." He studied her for a long moment, then removed his hat, revealing a shock of sandy brown hair and the kindest blue eyes she'd ever seen. "Name's Ben Everett. Most folks call me Ben. And I don't believe you're mad at all." He smiled then, a gentle curving of his lips. "I believe you just saved my hide." Abigail didn't know what surprised her more, his lack of fear or the way her heart stuttered at his smile. "If you saw the mountain lion," he continued, "then I'd like to know what else you see." She'd heard this before, from people wanting entertainment or looking to mock her, but something in his expression seemed genuinely curious. "That's not how it works," she said cautiously. "I can't control what I see or when I see it." Ben nodded thoughtfully. "Well, Miss Wheeler, I owe you my thanks regardless. May I escort you back to town?" "Abigail," she corrected, "and that's not necessary. I insist." His tone was gentle but firm. "A lady shouldn't ride alone so far from town." She almost laughed. No one in Winslow had worried about her welfare in years. "Very well, Mr. Everett." "Ben," he corrected with another smile. As they rode side by side, Abigail felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time: the absence of judgment. Ben asked about her father, about the small horse ranch she was struggling to maintain. Normal questions, as if she were a normal woman. When they reached the edge of her property, she expected him to tip his hat and ride on. Instead, he dismounted and helped her down from her horse, his hands strong and sure at her waist. "Miss Wheeler, Abigail," he said, not immediately stepping back. "I'm new to these parts, working for the Diamond Bar Ranch, but I'd like to call on you properly if you'd allow it." Abigail stared at him in disbelief. "You know what they say about me." "I know what they say," he agreed, "but I'd rather find out for myself." His eyes held hers, serious now. "You were labeled mad for seeing visions, Miss Wheeler. All I can say is, then show me what you see." The words hung between them, an invitation, a challenge, and perhaps something more. For the first time in years, Abigail felt a flicker of hope. "Sunday," she said finally, "after church." His smile returned, warm and genuine. "I'll be here." True to his word, Ben appeared at her door the following Sunday, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt beneath his vest. He'd brought wildflowers, gathered from the hills beyond town, and Abigail found herself blushing as she accepted them. They walked along the creek that bordered her property, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the dusty ground. Ben told her about growing up in Texas, about his years driving cattle north before settling in the Arizona Territory. "What brought you to Winslow?" she asked, carefully stepping over a fallen branch. "The railroad, mostly. Heard they were expanding through here, thought there'd be opportunity." He glanced at her. "What about your family? Been here long?" "My father came when I was just a girl after my mother died." He thought a fresh start would help. She paused. "The vision started after we moved here. He was the only one who believed me." Ben was quiet for a moment. "When did they start calling you mad?" "When I was 16. There was a flash flood coming. I saw it clearly, tried to warn everyone." Her voice grew quiet. "Some listened, some didn't. 3 people died. They said it was my fault, that I'd brought bad luck." "That's not right," Ben said, his voice hardening. "You tried to help." Abigail shrugged, the old pain still raw. "People fear what they don't understand." They walked in silence until they reached a bend in the creek where a large cottonwood provided shade. Ben helped her sit on a smooth boulder, then settled beside her. "Can I ask you something?" he said. When she nodded, he continued, "These visions, what are they like?" No one had ever asked her that before. They either dismissed her entirely or demanded predictions like she was a carnival fortune teller. "They're like memories, but of things that haven't happened yet," she explained slowly. "Sometimes clear, sometimes just feelings or fragments. They come without warning. And the mountain lion, that was clear," she nodded. "I saw you falling, bleeding. I couldn't just let it happen." Ben's eyes held hers. "I'm mighty glad you didn't." His hand moved slightly, his fingers brushing against hers on the rock between them. "Do you have any idea why you have these visions?" "My grandmother on my mother's side was Cherokee. My father used to say she had the sight too." Abigail looked down at their hands, so close but not quite touching. "He thought maybe it passed to me. A gift," Ben said quietly. "Most would call it a curse. Most people are fools." His fingers finally closed over hers, warm and calloused. "I've known my share of Indian medicine men, seen things that can't be explained by any book learning." Abigail felt a tightness in her chest, a combination of hope and fear. "You really don't think I'm mad?" "Mad?" Ben shook his head, a small smile playing at his lips. "Different maybe, special certainly, but not mad." When he walked her back to her house, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. At her door, he took her hand again, this time bringing it briefly to his lips. "May I call on you again?" he asked. "Yes," she answered, too quickly perhaps, but she couldn't find it in herself to care. His visits became regular Wednesday evenings after his work at the ranch, Sunday afternoons after church. They rode together across the open land, fished in the creek, and once, daringly, attended the town's harvest social. The whispers followed them, of course. Mad Abby Wheeler and the new cowboy who didn't know better. But for the first time in years, Abigail found herself not caring what others thought. Ben's presence beside her was like a shield. It was during their 5th Sunday together that the vision struck her without warning. One moment they were sharing a simple picnic beneath the cottonwood, and the next, Abigail was somewhere else entirely, seeing smoke and fire, hearing screams, feeling the heat of flames against her skin. "Abigail," Ben's voice seemed to come from far away. "Abigail, what's wrong?" She returned to herself with a gasp, finding Ben kneeling before her, his hands gripping her shoulders, his face etched with concern. "Fire," she whispered, her voice shaking. "The church. It's going to burn." Tonight, during the revival meeting, Ben didn't question her, didn't hesitate. "How bad, bad, people trapped inside." She clutched his arms. "Ben, we have to warn them." His jaw tightened. "They won't listen to you, I know, but I have to try." Ben helped her to her feet, his expression resolute. "Then we'll both try. And if they won't listen, we'll be there ourselves to help." They rode into town as quickly as their horses would carry them, arriving at the church just as Reverend Sullivan was setting up for the evening revival. The small white building was already being prepared, lanterns hung, extra chairs brought in for the expected crowd. "Reverend," Abigail called as they approached. "Reverend Sullivan, please." The older man turned, his welcoming smile fading when he saw who addressed him. "Miss Wheeler." "Mr. Everett." His nod was curt. "How can I help you?" "The lanterns," Abigail said, trying to keep her voice steady. "They're not safe. There's going to be a fire tonight." Sullivan's face hardened. "Now see here, Miss Wheeler, just listen to her," Ben interrupted, stepping closer to Abigail. "What harm is there in checking the lanterns, making sure everything's secure?" "I don't need advice on how to run my church, young man," Sullivan said coldly. "Especially not based on the ravings of—" He stopped himself, but the word hung unspoken between them. "A madwoman." Abigail finished for him, her cheeks burning with humiliation. "Is that what you were going to say, Reverend?" The preacher had the grace to look slightly abashed. "Miss Wheeler, your condition is well known in this town. I pray for your healing, but I will not alarm my congregation based on your feelings." "They're not feelings," Ben said, his voice tight with anger. "She's trying to help you. Mr. Everett, you're new here. You don't understand. I understand plenty." Ben stepped forward, his tall frame imposing. "At least do me the courtesy of checking those lanterns, for safety's sake." Sullivan sighed heavily. "Fine. I'll have Deacon Morris look them over. Will that satisfy you?" It wouldn't be enough, Abigail knew, but it was all they would get. "Thank you," she said quietly, already turning away. As they walked back to their horses, Ben's hand found the small of her back. "We'll come back tonight," he said, his voice low. "We'll be ready." The revival meeting was set to begin at 7. By 6:30, Abigail and Ben were positioned across the street, watching as townspeople filed into the church. No one seemed to notice them in the growing darkness, or if they did, they chose to ignore the town madwoman and her misguided companion. "There's still time to leave," Abigail said softly. "You don't have to be part of this." "Your reputation, to hell with my reputation," Ben interrupted, his eyes never leaving the church. "If what you saw is coming, those people need help." The minutes ticked by slowly. By 8 o'clock, the singing from inside the church had reached a fever pitch, the revival in full swing. Abigail began to doubt her vision. Perhaps she'd been wrong this time. Perhaps the first flicker of flame appeared at the back corner of the church roof, where a lantern hung too close to the dry wooden shingles. It was small at first, just a tiny orange glow against the darkness. "There," Ben said, already moving. "Abigail, go ring the town bell. I'll try to get people out." She ran toward the town square while Ben sprinted for the church. By the time she reached the bell tower and began pulling on the heavy rope, the flames had spread across half the roof. The sound of the bell, urgent and loud in the quiet night, brought people running from all directions. Abigail abandoned the bell and raced back toward the church. The scene was chaos, people streaming from the doors, coughing and disoriented. The fire had moved quickly, consuming the dry wood of the old building. Smoke poured from the windows and doors. "Is everyone out?" she asked a woman clutching a small child to her chest. "I don't know," the woman sobbed. "It happened so fast." Abigail scanned the crowd desperately. Where was Ben? She hadn't seen him come out. Then she heard a child's cry from inside the building. Without thinking, Abigail ran toward the church, ignoring the shouts behind her. The heat hit her like a wall as she pushed through the door, smoke immediately filling her lungs. She dropped to her knees, trying to see through the haze. "Hello," she called, coughing. "Where are you?" A small whimper came from beneath a pew near the front. Abigail crawled forward, finding a young girl of perhaps 5 or 6 huddled in terror. "Come with me," she said, reaching for the child. "We need to get out." The girl came willingly into her arms. Abigail turned, trying to remember which way the door was through the thickening smoke. A burning beam crashed down behind them, making the child scream in terror. "This way," Abigail said, though she was no longer sure. The smoke was disorienting, making her eyes water and her lungs burn. Suddenly, a tall figure appeared through the smoke. "Abigail!" Ben, relief flooded through her. "I've got a child." He reached them in 3 long strides, scooping both Abigail and the girl into his arms. "Hold on," he ordered, then turned and moved unerringly toward the exit. The night air had never tasted so sweet. Ben set them down a safe distance from the building, where a woman ran forward with a cry of relief, taking the child from Abigail's arms. "My baby." "Oh, thank God." Ben steadied Abigail as she swayed on her feet. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his face black with soot, his eyes intense as they scanned her for injuries. "No," she managed between coughs. Before he could answer, Reverend Sullivan approached them, his expression a mix of shock and something that might have been shame. "Miss Wheeler," he said, his voice hoarse from smoke, you tried to warn us." Abigail said nothing, too exhausted to respond. Ben's arm tightened around her waist. "You should have listened to her," he said flatly. Sullivan nodded slowly. Yes, we should have." By morning, word had spread throughout Winslow. Mad Abby Wheeler had predicted the church fire. Mad Abby Wheeler had run into the burning building to save little Mary Thomas. Perhaps, the whispers went, she wasn't so mad after all. Ben stayed with her that night, sleeping on a chair by her door like a faithful guardian. When morning came, he made her tea and insisted she rest while he tended to her horses. "You don't have to do this," she told him when he returned, carrying firewood he'd chopped without being asked. "I know," he replied simply, setting the wood by the stove. "I want to." That afternoon, while Abigail dozed in a chair on her small porch, visitors began to arrive. First came Mary Thomas's mother, bringing a freshly baked pie and tearful thanks. Then Widow Jenkins with a jar of preserves. Even Reverend Sullivan appeared, hat in hand, to offer a formal apology and an invitation to return to the congregation, once they'd rebuilt the church. Abigail accepted their gifts and thanks with quiet grace, but their sudden change of heart left her feeling hollow. These same people had shunned her for years, had called her mad, had crossed the street to avoid her. When the last visitor had gone, Ben settled beside her on the porch steps. "You don't trust it," he observed. "Their change of heart." "Would you?" she asked softly. "They hated me yesterday. Feared me. Now suddenly I'm their savior because my madness proved useful." Ben took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. People fear what they don't understand, but fear can turn to respect when they see the truth. And what is the truth, Ben Everett? She turned to look at him, suddenly needing to know. What do you see when you look at me? His eyes met hers, clear and unwavering. I see a woman with an extraordinary gift, a woman who suffered for it but never turned bitter. A woman who ran into a burning building to save a child who might have been taught to call her mad. His hand tightened around hers. I see the woman I'm falling in love with. The words hung between them, honest and raw. Abigail felt tears spring to her eyes. You barely know me, she whispered. I know enough. Ben reached up, gently brushing a tear from her cheek. I know that whatever you see, whatever visions come to you, I want to be there. I want to believe in you, Abigail Wheeler, when no one else would. He kissed her then, softly at first, then with growing certainty as she responded. It was her first kiss, and it felt like a vision itself, full of promise and possibilities she'd never dared to imagine. That night, as Ben rode back to the ranch, promising to return the next day, Abigail stood on her porch watching until he disappeared from sight. For the first time in years, she felt not the burden of her visions, but their potential. Not the weight of others' judgment, but the lightness of being truly seen. Ben kept his word, returning the next evening with news that surprised her. I've given notice at the Diamond Bar, he told her as they sat together on the porch. 2 weeks and I'm done. Abigail stared at him. But why? You've only been there a few months. Because they're sending me north to the new pastures, and that's too far from Winslow. He took her hand. Too far from you. Ben, you can't give up your livelihood for me. His smile was gentle but determined. I'm not giving up anything important. Besides, I've been thinking. Your father's horse ranch needs work. The fences are falling down, the stable needs repairs. With the railroad coming, there'll be demand for good horses. You want to work my father's ranch? She asked, confused. I want to work our ranch, he corrected. If you'll have me. Abigail's heart stuttered in her chest. Ben, are you? What are you saying? He shifted to face her directly, taking both her hands in his. I'm saying that I love you, Abigail Wheeler. I'm saying that I want to build a life with you. I'm saying that I believe in your visions, and I want to be the man who helps you use them, not fear them. People will talk, she whispered, though her heart was already answering yes. Let them. Ben's eyes were steady. Folks are already changing their minds about you after the fire. And those that don't, well, their opinions don't matter much to me. Abigail looked at their joined hands, hardly daring to believe this was real. I've been alone so long, she admitted. I don't know if I remember how not to be. Then we'll learn together. He lifted her hands to his lips. What do your visions tell you, Abigail? What do you see for us? And that was just it. She'd never had a vision of Ben, of their future. Whatever lay ahead for them was unwritten, unknown even to her strange gift. Nothing, she said, and laughed softly at his surprised expression. I see nothing. For the first time, Ben, I get to be just like everyone else, hoping and trusting without knowing. His smile returned. Is that a yes, then? Yes, she whispered, and this time she was the one who leaned forward to seal the promise with a kiss. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. True to his word, Ben finished his time at the Diamond Bar, then moved his few possessions to Abigail's house, though he insisted on sleeping in the small guest room until they were properly married. During the days, they worked side by side, repairing fences, mucking out stalls, and assessing the work needed to turn the neglected property back into a functioning horse ranch. To Abigail's surprise, several townspeople offered help. Deacon Morris brought lumber left over from his barn raising. The blacksmith offered a discount on new horseshoes. Even Sheriff Taylor stopped by to ask if Ben might be interested in boarding the town's horses once the stables were repaired. "Seems your standing in town is improving," Ben observed one evening as they sat together on the newly mended porch swing. "Yours too," Abigail replied. "They approve of your plans for the ranch, and of you," she hesitated, "though some still think you're making a mistake with me." Ben's arm tightened around her shoulders. "The only mistake would have been not finding you." The wedding was set for October, a simple ceremony to be held in the town square since the church was still being rebuilt. Reverend Sullivan would officiate, and to Abigail's amazement, several prominent townswomen had offered to help with preparations. 3 days before the wedding, the vision came. Abigail was in the kitchen, kneading bread dough while Ben repaired a bridle at the table. The familiar disorientation swept over her, the present fading as another reality took shape before her eyes. She saw riders, 5 of them, approaching Winslow from the east, men with hard faces and guns drawn. She saw the general store in flames, heard gunshots, saw Sheriff Taylor falling, blood spreading across his chest. When she came back to herself, she was on the floor, Ben kneeling beside her, his face tight with worry. "What did you see?" he asked, helping her to a chair. "Raiders," she said, her voice shaking. "Coming to town. Tomorrow or the next day, they're going to rob the store, kill Sheriff Taylor." Ben's expression hardened. "We need to warn them." "Will they believe me? After the church, I think some will." He squeezed her hand. "But we need to be smart about this. We need a plan in case they don't." They rode into town together, heading straight for the sheriff's office. To Abigail's relief, Sheriff Taylor listened to her account without interruption, his weathered face serious. "You're certain about this?" he asked when she'd finished. "As certain as I was about the church," she replied. Taylor nodded slowly. "Ben, you any good with that 6-shooter?" "Good enough," Ben answered. "And I can round up some men from the Diamond Bar if you need help." The sheriff considered this. "Do it. But quiet like. We don't want to spook these raiders if they have scouts watching the town." Word spread cautiously through Winslow. Some scoffed at the warning, but others, those who remembered the church fire, made preparations. Valuables were hidden, children kept close to home, extra ammunition distributed to those willing to stand with the sheriff. The raiders came at dawn the next day, just as Abigail had foreseen. But instead of finding a sleeping, unprepared town, they rode into an ambush. Sheriff Taylor and his deputies, along with Ben and 4 cowboys from the Diamond Bar, were waiting. The ensuing gunfight was brief but intense. 2 raiders fell, another was wounded, and the remaining 2 surrendered. When it was over, Abigail emerged from the doctor's office where she'd been helping prepare for casualties. She found Ben by the jail, his shirt torn and a small cut above his eyebrow, but otherwise unharmed. "You were right," he said as she examined his injury. "Every detail, just as you saw it." "Not every detail," she corrected, relief making her voice tremble. "The sheriff is alive. The store isn't burning, because we listened to you." Ben pulled her into his arms, heedless of who might be watching, because this time they believed. The wedding went ahead as planned, though with considerably more enthusiasm from the townspeople than Abigail could have ever imagined. The town square was decorated with autumn flowers and ribbons, and it seemed that every resident of Winslow had turned out to see the seer marry her cowboy. Abigail wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully altered by Widow Jenkins and her sewing circle. Ben stood waiting for her beneath an arch of twisted branches and wildflowers, looking more handsome than any man had a right to in his new suit and polished boots. As Reverend Sullivan spoke the traditional words, Abigail felt a strange sense of peace. The visions would continue, she knew. There would be more warnings to give, more dangers to face, but she would no longer face them alone. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Sullivan declared, beaming at them both. "Mr. Everett, you may kiss your bride." Ben's kiss was tender and sure, a promise for all the days to come. When they turned to face the assembled townspeople, the applause was genuine and warm. "Well, Mrs. Everett," Ben whispered as they walked back down the makeshift aisle, "what do you see now?" Abigail smiled up at him, her heart full to bursting. "Everything," she said. "I see everything." The first year of their marriage passed in a blur of hard work and quiet joy. The horse ranch, now called Everett Stables, began to thrive under their joint care. Ben had a natural way with horses, and Abigail discovered a talent for breeding that surprised them both. By the spring of 1876, they had 8 fine horses in their stable and orders for more from as far away as Flagstaff. The visions continued, of course. Sometimes they were small, a lost child found before panic set in, a prairie fire spotted before it reached the town, a warning of bad meat at the butcher's that saved many from illness. With each accurate prediction, Abigail's standing in Winslow grew. What had once been called madness was now referred to, with cautious respect, as Mrs. Everett's gift. Not everyone believed, of course. There were still those who crossed themselves when she passed, who whispered about witchcraft and devilry. But Ben's steady presence beside her, and the growing number of people whose lives she'd touched, created a buffer against the worst of the prejudice. It was in the summer of their second year of marriage that Abigail realized she was with child. The knowledge came not through a vision but through the ordinary signs any woman might recognize. When she told Ben, his joy was boundless. "A baby," he said in wonder, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." The pregnancy was easy at first, morning sickness giving way to a healthy glow and growing roundness. Ben became fiercely protective, insisting she rest more and take on fewer chores around the ranch. Abigail indulged his concern, touched by his devotion. But as her 6th month began, the visions changed. They became more intense, more frequent, and centered increasingly on the baby. She saw a tiny girl with Ben's blue eyes and her dark hair. She saw the child growing, running through fields, laughing. But sometimes, flickering at the edges of these happy visions, she saw darkness, a difficult birth, danger hovering. She kept these fears from Ben at first, not wanting to worry him. But as her time grew closer, the dark visions intensified until she could no longer hide her distress. "Tell me," Ben insisted one night as he held her through another bout of trembling that followed a vision. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together." "The birth," she whispered against his chest. "Something goes wrong. I can't see clearly, but there's danger, Ben. For me or the baby, I don't know." His arms tightened around her. "Then we'll be ready. We'll have the doctor stay here when your time comes. We'll take every precaution." What if it's not enough? The fear that had been building for months finally found voice. What if this is one vision I can't change? Ben took her face in his hands, his eyes fierce in the lamplight. "Listen to me, Abigail Everett. Your visions are warnings, not sentences. They show what might be, not what must be. We've changed fate before, and we'll do it again." She wanted desperately to believe him. As her 9th month approached, Ben arranged for Doc Wilson to stay in their guest room. He hired a midwife from Flagstaff to assist and brought in a young woman from town to help with the cooking and cleaning. The nursery was ready, a beautiful crib that Ben had crafted himself waiting for its tiny occupant. The labor began on a stormy night in April, startling Abigail from sleep with its sudden intensity. Ben was instantly alert, calling for the doctor while he held her hand through the first contractions. "Remember to breathe," he murmured, his voice steady even as his eyes betrayed his fear. "I'm right here. I won't leave you." The hours blurred into a haze of pain and determination. The midwife's calm instructions, the doctor's reassuring presence, Ben's unwavering support all became anchors in a storm of sensation. By dawn, Abigail was exhausted, the labor progressing slowly despite her efforts. "Something's wrong," she gasped between contractions. "Ben, the baby is fine," Doc Wilson assured her after a quick examination. "But you need to save your strength, Mrs. Everett. This might take a while longer." By midday, concern had crept into the doctor's expression. The baby hadn't descended properly, he explained in low tones to Ben. If things didn't progress soon, both mother and child could be in danger. Abigail, drifting in and out of awareness, caught fragments of their conversation. Fear clawed at her heart. Was this the danger she'd foreseen? Was she about to lose everything? As another contraction gripped her, the vision came not of the future this time, but of a woman she recognized from her father's old photographs. Her grandmother, the Cherokee healer who had passed the sight to her. The apparition spoke no words, but somehow Abigail understood what she needed to do. When the contraction passed, she gripped Ben's hand with surprising strength. "Help me stand," she ordered. "What? Abigail, you can't trust me," she insisted. "Help me stand and walk. The baby needs to turn." Ben looked to the doctor, who hesitated, then nodded slowly. "It's unconventional, but it might help. We can try." With Ben supporting most of her weight, Abigail walked the length of the bedroom, pausing when contractions came, breathing through the pain. Back and forth they moved, a slow, determined dance. The midwife hummed softly, an old song that seemed to resonate with something deep in Abigail's bones. After the third circuit of the room, Abigail felt a shift inside her, a sensation of rightness where before there had been wronging. "Now," she gasped. "It's time now." They barely made it back to the bed before the final stage of labor overtook her. 3 pushes later, their daughter slid into the world with a lusty cry that filled the room with joy. "She's perfect," Ben whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as he held their tiny daughter while the doctor tended to Abigail. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and a set of lungs that'll wake the horses. Exhausted but triumphant, Abigail reached for her child. The moment the baby was placed in her arms, she knew the darkness had passed. Whatever danger had threatened them had been averted. "Sarah," she said, looking up at Ben. "After my grandmother, the one who had the sight." Ben nodded, his hand gently stroking the dark fuzz on their daughter's head. "Sarah Everett. It's perfect." Later, when the doctor and midwife had gone to rest and the house was quiet except for the soft sounds of the newborn, Ben stretched out carefully beside Abigail on their bed. "You knew what to do," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "You saw it, didn't you?" "Not exactly." Abigail smiled tiredly. "It was more like I was shown. My grandmother came to me, showed me what to do." Ben was silent for a moment, his finger tracing the curve of their daughter's cheek as she nursed. "You think she'll have it too, the sight?" "I don't know," Abigail admitted. "But if she does, she'll never have to hide it. She'll never be called mad or feared for her gift." "No," Ben agreed firmly. "She'll be taught to understand it, to use it wisely, and she'll always know she's loved, visions or no visions." As Sarah grew, it became apparent that she had indeed inherited her mother's gift, though it manifested differently. Where Abigail's visions came suddenly and vividly, Sarah's appeared in dreams and quiet moments, more like gentle nudges than overwhelming revelations. By the time she was 5, the people of Winslow had come to accept the Everett women as a blessing rather than a curse. Travelers sometimes went miles out of their way to visit the ranch, seeking guidance or simply to satisfy their curiosity about the seers of Arizona territory. The ranch prospered, expanding to include not just horses but cattle as well. Ben hired hands to help with the growing operation, and they built a larger house to accommodate their family, which grew again with the birth of their son, William, in 1880. William showed no signs of the sight, but he had his father's way with horses and his mother's quiet determination. The siblings were inseparable despite their differences, Sarah often using her gift to find William's constantly misplaced belongings, while he defended his witch sister fiercely against any lingering prejudice. As the children grew, so did Winslow. The railroad brought growth and opportunity, just as Ben had predicted. The town expanded, bringing new faces and new ideas. Abigail and Ben became respected figures in the community, their opinions sought on matters ranging from business ventures to personal problems. In the spring of 1885, 10 years after Ben had first asked Abigail to show him what she saw, they stood together on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard with the newest litter of puppies from their sheepdog's brood. "Do you remember what you said to me that day by the creek?" Abigail asked, leaning into her husband's embrace. "When I told you about my visions." Ben smiled, his arms tightening around her waist. A decade of Arizona sun and hard work had weathered his face, adding character to his handsome features. "I believe I said that most people are fools." Abigail laughed softly. "You did, and you were right. About the fools or about your gift? Both." She turned in his arms to face him. "You were the only one who ever asked me to show you what I saw. Not to prove anything or to mock me, but because you wanted to understand." Ben's eyes, still as blue and kind as the day they'd met, held hers. "And what do you see now, Mrs. Everett? For us, for our future?" Abigail closed her eyes briefly, not seeking a vision but simply feeling the rightness of the moment. "I see many more years together. I see our children growing strong and sure. I see this land flourishing under our care." She opened her eyes, smiling up at the man who had believed in her when no one else would. "I see love, Ben. Most of all, I see love." He kissed her then, a kiss that held a decade of shared joys and sorrows, of visions heeded and dangers averted, of a partnership that had begun with a simple challenge. "Then show me what you see." And she had shown him not just the visions that came unbidden, but the possibilities that lay within her heart. The possibility of being accepted, of being understood, of being loved not despite her difference but because of it. In a world that had once called her mad, Abigail Wheeler Everett had found the greatest vision of all, a life filled with purpose and belonging, with a man who had the courage to see beyond the fears and prejudices of others. As the sun set over their ranch, painting the Arizona sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, Ben and Abigail watched their children race toward them, faces alight with the simple joy of being. This was their true vision come to life, a family bound not just by blood but by understanding, a home built on faith and trust. "Mama," Sarah called, her dark hair flying behind her as she ran. "I dreamed about rain coming, lots of rain." Ben laughed, lifting their daughter into his arms when she reached them. "Is that so? Well, we'd better check the roof for leaks, hadn't we?" William, more serious at 6 than his sister was at 10, nodded solemnly. "I'll help, Pa. I can hammer real good now." "That you can, son." Ben ruffled the boy's sandy hair, so like his own. "We'll start tomorrow." Later that night, as thunder rumbled in the distance, and the first drops of Sarah's predicted rain began to fall, Ben and Abigail lay together in the darkness of their bedroom, listening to the comforting sounds of water on the roof and their children sleeping peacefully down the hall. "She's getting stronger," Abigail murmured. "Her visions are coming more clearly now." Ben's fingers traced lazy patterns on her arm. "She has a good teacher." "I worry sometimes," Abigail admitted. "The world is changing. Cities are growing, science advancing." Will there be a place for her gift in the world she'll inherit? There will always be a place for truth, Ben said with quiet certainty. And that's what the visions are, in the end, glimpses of truth that others can't see. Abigail nestled closer to him, drawing comfort from his warmth. When did you get so wise, Cowboy? About the time I fell in love with a madwoman, he teased, earning a gentle slap on his chest. The best decision I ever made. Outside, the rain fell harder, washing the desert clean, preparing it for new growth. Inside, sheltered by walls built with love and understanding, the Everetts slept, a family born from a simple act of faith, when a lonely cowboy had looked into the eyes of a woman called Mad and asked to see what she saw. In the years that followed, Winslow continued to grow, and with it, the legend of the Everett women. Sarah, following in her mother's footsteps, used her gift to help others, eventually marrying the town doctor's son and raising her own family on a neighboring property. William took over management of the ranch operations as Ben and Abigail grew older, expanding it into one of the most successful in the territory. By the turn of the century, when Arizona was preparing for statehood, Ben and Abigail had become elder statespeople of the community, their weathered faces and intertwined hands a testament to a love that had overcome prejudice and fear. And if, occasionally, visitors to Winslow asked about the woman who had once been called Mad, they were told not a story of madness, but a vision of a woman who saw beyond the present moment, and of the cowboy who had the courage to see beyond the judgments of others. For what Ben Everett had recognized that day long ago was not just Abigail's gift of sight, but the truth that lay beneath it, that sometimes what the world calls madness is merely the courage to see things as they truly are, or as they might become. And in that recognition, he had found not just a wife, but a journey worth taking, a future worth building, and a love story worth telling for generations to come.